Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world. Hi, and welcome to our next episode of Decoding AQ. With me today, I've got Professor Jonathan Passmore, and he's described as the leader's psychologist, rated as one of the top 10 professional coaches in the world. And I can't imagine somebody more prolific, because his work over the last 3 decades has included 30 books, 100 scientific articles, and contributed to loads of different things that is securing him as one of the global thought leaders. So welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you very much indeed, Ross. It's great to be with you this morning.
What was the choice in having a world map behind you, Jonathan? So for those who are listening, on the Zoom video, I have met Jonathan and he's got a world map behind him. So I want to ask him, what was the inspiration behind that? Do you love travel? What's behind it?
So the truth is, it's just a really big picture that covers a white wall. So what was the biggest picture that I could find? And of course, this is fantastic. It does that, but it also means that pretty much anyone on a Zoom call or a Google Meet call asks that question. They say, oh, why's the map there? So it's a great starter point for a conversation. People look for their own country, and we can then have a conversation often about where we've traveled. And you're right, I do love travel. I do love the diversity and the variety that we see across the world, from people to climate to environment. Different animals, different species, different mountain ranges and lakes. And I've traveled extensively across the world from probably 120 countries, as unusual as, or maybe as popular as the United States to an unusual as North Korea.
It's interesting, isn't it? Where do we, in this journey of lifelong learning, where do we get our inspiration from? And someone who I read, holds 5 degrees, and MBAs and doctorates and all of these things all around understanding people and business, occupational psychology, and working in academic and then corporate world and people dealing with things and bridging that gap. Not something that many people actually successfully do. It's kind of, I've seen people that go right into academic world and they go deep in there and they find it hard to cross that chasm, and lots of them want to, but are not as successful in trying to dance that tension point between academic work and then the work of supporting organizations, helping drive, strategic change in the commercial world and the economic world. I want to ask you a question before that, because as somebody who has traveled loads, as we've just learned, and has been on a lifelong journey of learning and evolving, what got you into coaching? Was there a moment you can remember that got you into, this is an area where I'm fascinated or I can thrive? What was the story that led you to that, Jonathan?
Well, as a psychologist, as somebody who was interested in people, interested in the stories that they tell, the challenges that they have, coaching alongside the wider positive psychology movement and the wider environmental organizational change agendas, coaching seemed to be a logical next step. So it came about really just as part of a number of things that I was working on in assignments with clients. And from that initial offering, requests from clients to help them overcome as an individual particular challenges that they were having, that led to my own growing curiosity around that, to try and understand more about the evidence around the science. So at that particular stage, very little scientific inquiry done. And we're talking about the late 1990s and the early 2000s. What we really had in terms of publications were case studies, maybe in a few magazines or a few journals, where an individual consultant would have described the work that they were doing. In many cases, certainly in the UK, we were describing some of those change conversations as career counselling. There was mentoring. There's a little reference to coaching, but no evidence-based, no science around that. So starting from those initial conversations with individuals who were seeking to make change, a curious mind. Then that led me gradually into an inquiry as a doctorate thesis. So during the following 5 years, starting to gather some of that reading together, to be curious about, well, what might I do if there's little evidence here? What could I offer to build up an evidence base in this area? And that then led me to carry out a doctoral study, read other people's doctoral studies that were going on, just a handful that were taking place, and the emergence of some scientific literature that was beginning to appear in the 2003, 2007 period. And from there, then as you publish your work, then people ask you to do more work in that space. And of course, it becomes, over time, the more you do something in an area, it becomes your specialism. So it becomes what defines you. It's not that I'm not interested in organizational change. I am. I'm also interested in psychometrics. I'm interested in a range of other things, but it became the thing that I was known for and have then increasingly worked in and specialized in. And so that becomes what I do now. Really is almost all of my energy and effort goes into coaching psychology, the practice and the science around that. And having a curious mind is one aspect of it. Always being open to possibility and asking further questions about what else, how could we understand this better? What other evidence could we begin to build that might help my understanding, my practice? And then the second aspect, I suppose, that's important, that we shouldn't forget, is that often events happen and you're just lucky in your career. And I was just lucky. I was lucky at a time that the wave was rising. And so those people, maybe in different spheres and at different levels of success, absolutely, but people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs got in early as the wave was rising in technology. Coaching's a tiny wave in comparison to that, but I was just lucky. And there are other people who were just lucky at the time. Anthony Grant at Sydney, Stephen Palmer in the UK, who again just were at that emergence of that wave when the interest around this was beginning to build in organizations and individuals. And we were there at the start and have then caught that wave that's carried us forward. And the three of us, but there are others, many others as well, who are doing great work at the early stages. And now we're seeing a plethora of PhD researchers, some really good studies that are coming on. And from that, 3, 4, 5 research papers that were published, that we're beginning to think about, how could we measure coaching? What does it do? How could it help individuals and organizations? We've got hundreds of studies that have now been published by many, many researchers and many practitioners, to the point where we now have got really robust and strong evidence that coaching works, and that most leaders and managers have either had coaching or want it because they recognize the power that offers them to learn, to change, to develop, to be the best version of themselves.
I think, I agree with so much of this energy behind coaching, where we had structure in organizations that drove value, that drove change from management. And it was all about how do we manage people and how do we lead people, to now how do we coach them? And that shift around, we're managing a task or a function, to a coaching an individual for a future capability and a future potential. And that shift from perhaps productivity and efficiency of task related performance and product to now, how do we imagine new thoughts? How do we create new things for people that we perhaps haven't envisaged before, that we could unlock and give them new pathways? And I think that's both exciting and terrifying at the same time. And that's part of our human behavior. And I'm interested in terms of your thoughts on, so you saw this curiosity around coaching. What does it do? Had a look at what exists from a scientific evidence base. Now there's a body of that work. Is that changing decision-making about coaching? Or is it just, lots of people who like that little bit in their little world going, hey, well done. Yes, we've done some great research, but is it driving different decisions, or is it still linked to, I want to see the outcome and the impact? What are the sort of challenges if an organization's looking at this and saying, oh, I've got so many blooming fires, Jonathan. There's so many things happening. I've got retention issues. I've got this issue. I've got this issue. And I've got 100 different people saying to me, this is the way to solve it. It's called coaching. It's called technology. It's called insert whatever the solution is someone's coming up with. How might people navigate all of these solutions to the ongoing challenge of change and growth where coaching comes in? What's some of the narratives that you've experienced over your career around that conversation, and whereas the research and evidence perhaps helped in that wave?
So I think one of the things that has contributed to coaching's success now is the personalization of learning. So, and the wider personalization that we see in society. No longer is it a case of how do you treat cancer? It's a question of how do you treat my cancer? So given my genetic code, given my weight, my geography, my gender, a deeper understanding of the recognition that treatment pathways for individuals can be different and much more personalized and likely to lead to better outcomes. And we've seen that in a whole variety of different ways. There was a time when your parents and mine sat down with us when we were small children to watch a particular comedy show that was super popular on a Thursday night. And we'd all sit there on the sofa and watch it. Now, in our families, I'll be sitting in one room doing something, and one of my children will be sitting in another room consuming Netflix. Another child will be catching up with the BBC and a show that they enjoyed there, and my wife will be in another room consuming something else. So we have that individualization connected to entertainment, and the individual approach is also taking place in the workplace. So no longer do we believe that a sheep dip approach, here's one course, we're going to put everybody through the same learning program, and out they come at the other end. That may have been popular in the 1990s. Now we're recognizing that individuals need an individual approach to help them move from where they are to where they need to be, using their strengths and the challenges that they're facing in their particular office, their location, their particular area of the business. And I think the other thing that has been happening in organizations as they think about the nature of their use of coaching is a desire to spread this across the workforce. So we have got this desire for scale to be able to respond to the variety of different locations. And no longer do you have operations happening out of one particular city. In that office, we buy in a trainer who comes to work with everybody in that particular office. Organizations are now thinking, how do we do this across our globe, across our global workforce? And so coaching meets the individual need. So how do we then help the individual deal with the challenges they're facing? And this idea about globalization, global provision, and how do we have one contract that we're able to then deliver to meet all those individual needs? So I think those aspects coming together have then seen a growth of popularization of coaching, and particularly a popularization of digital coaching platforms that have solved the issue around measurability, convenience, and scale that allow the HR community to buy coaching for many people at a cost that they can afford. I think the other challenge, I guess, that we are seeing across the global environment is how the economies are changing. So as we look back, we might be thinking about, well, we've had a sustained period of global growth, but as we look forward, the waters look a little bit more choppy. And so having more flexibility to be able to support people, both in those growth phases, but also during troubled and choppy times, whether that's through merger and acquisition, coaching can be highly effective there, helping people with well-being and stress. We've had the challenges of COVID. Now we're facing some choppier waters, maybe in economic terms. Then again, coaching can be a great support and a resource for employees to help them to manage the transitions of those choppy waters as it is in those times of growth.
And I guess one of the historical models and playbooks we had was we want to impart knowledge, we'll broadcast this knowledge, and we will educate and people will learn. And then we hope they retain it at the point they need it. Now we're at this real time that I want it in line with life. I want to, when I'm faced with a challenge or problem, I want to find the training, the solution, the learning, the coaching at that moment. And so therefore we have a timing and accessibility and a scalability problem. So we digitize things, but then by doing that, we homogenized many of it. So it didn't apply for me. And this is the balance and challenge that I think we're going through, is this transition where we've digitized, but we've homogenized a lot of the content material. Here's another LMS, go and fill your boots. There's loads of content in there too. The beauty when you have a conversation with a coach who listens, who is the human filter to ask those right questions, to find those next bits, to tease out what you didn't necessarily know was even possible and help plan that roadmap towards it, is still then, how do we do that at scale that's affordable, is still a bit of a challenge that at executive level, cool, at the hundreds of thousands, at the millions that are working in organizations that might not have the ability to support that. I think there's such huge potential for coaching to have its impact that we're seeing at the high level, but it has not been democratized yet. And lots of, as you say, these emerging platforms, these emerging companies, and you've got a new role, at CoachHub. And they're one of them who is starting to deal this, along with BetterUp, with Coaching.com, with all these organizations that are seeing this tremendous shift to navigate accelerating change. And that's fundamentally what we're trying to solve, is to make sure people don't end up in dark rooms with sharp objects through dealing with what we're dealing with, And I'm interested in terms of the experience for, in terms of your new role, whilst you're doing many things, still working, as I understand, at business schools, still doing teaching work, in terms of these organizations like Coaching Hub, what's the sort of experience and proposition for the sort of two sides, for coaches of coming into that, and then perhaps for organizations that are trying to solve some of these challenges? Just give us a little bit more flavor for that, Jonathan.
So I think at Coach Hub, it's part of that revolution that you're describing, the revolution bringing together the science and evidence of coaching, that it works, together with the revolution that we're seeing in technology and our accessibility through communications apps, such as the one that we're speaking on now, and our trust in that can be both secure through those platforms, but also robust and reliable, that we get a continuous signal, that we're not going to see that signal dropping out. And I think that move, that trend that was happening during the late 2017, 18, 19 was then accelerated as a result of COVID, and that we were all forced into our bedrooms or into our offices to really rely on that. And people found out, actually, not only can I do it, but my granny can do it. So if my granny can do it, then we can all do it. And that has led to the acceleration of coaching platforms. And then there has been the desire in organizations that this offers, as I was saying, around the ability for scale, measuring impact, for them to be able to democratize coaching across the tens and hundreds of thousands of people that might be in an individual business. And we're certainly seeing that at CoachHub. Many clients coming to us wanting to, first of all, test out with a small group, maybe 50, and then turning the 50 into 500, as they then spread that across different geographical territories, different languages, and also seeing the benefits of complementary content that we have, at least on our platform, where people can have the coaching session and then go in and read or watch some videos relating to the specific learning that their coach directs them to. So having as much coaching as you want, whenever you want it, is a huge benefit. Being able to scale that at a price that an organization can afford. I think there's also important for us not to forget that while commercial organizations have made great strides in that area, and organizations are engaging very actively, and that's seen CoachHub's continued massive growth that we've experienced over the last 3 years. There's also a whole plethora of individuals who still are not yet able to access coaching. And at CoachHub, we do a little bit to reach those people. So I'm thinking about organizations in the not-for-profit sector that may not have funding, very small organizations that might be reliant upon volunteers to help them. How do we reach them? How do we reach many of the others who would like to access coaching that might, because of their individual career, the organization that they work at, the economy in which they are working, where pay rates may be significantly lower? How do we enable them to get access to coaching? At CoachHub, we do CoachHub for good. So we provide quite a bit of pro bono coaching, but it's a drop in the ocean. And I think technology can help us there. And the role that AI potentially can play in coaching bots, it's not as good as a human, certainly not yet, and probably not for some while. But I think coach bots can be part of that solution of taking the democratization of coaching further to allow individuals, whoever they might be, where maybe that's a university student who hasn't got the money or isn't in employment to be able to access a platform, or the university isn't funding it. Maybe they're in Pakistan, or maybe they're in Angola, but they would still love to access that, to a small not-for-profit organization in the Sudan who may be working predominantly with volunteers. How do we enable them to have access to coaching? So AI could be part of that solution along with platforms. And then, of course, we'll still have the niche premium coaches working at the top of the market with very expensive rates, but for leaders who might want to have a personalized relationship, almost like your bespoke suit, your made-to-measure suit, made by your particular designer who understands you, has got your measurements down, comes to meet you at your home, measures it, you choose the fabric, and that's made specially just for you. That market will continue alongside, in my view, the 80% that will be digitized, and probably the most significant part of that will be platforms. And then there will be a role, in my view, as we continue to move forward, for those coaching bots to allow many people to access maybe $1 or $5 to access that technology and the power that coaching can offer for unleashing their potential, helping them think through the challenge that they're facing now, today, this moment.
It's interesting, isn't it, when we try and envisage a future and we think about it, and we, as humans, whilst there might be dark things that come out in movies that are dystopian, we tend to try and have a utopian view of, we want to create a future that's better than our past. What might that look like? So part of it might be the quality of that content. Part of it might be the quality of the experience, how personalized it is. Part of it might be the accessibility of that. And all of these converging things that are coming together, of AI, of technology, of joining communities that can start to solve some of those challenges. And I'm interested in terms of, as we come to a bit of a wrap up of this, is when we're thinking about the future of coaching, where we're now seeing we've got some more evidence, the wave has just started, we're just at the tip of the iceberg of what's happening. And we can get now from where we saw in sports, my brother's been training Olympic athletes in Canada for the last 2 decades. And in sports, having coaches, and not just one, but multiple of around one athlete from every aspect of their lives, from strength and conditioning to nutrition, to a sleep coach, to whatever it may be, and big sports teams, we've seen that, to now the proliferation of, I can have my sports coach in an app and do my training versus a personal trainer. We've seen it become democratized into a subscription base that's not going to be as good as my brother going and seeing him, but it's good enough for me in what I'm doing. And I wonder where this transition of, in our economy, where we've gone, hey, we want to retain talent, we've got this big challenge, we want to have organizations that have them, to a shift to gig economy, more flexibility, more, I'm going to go and work on specific projects, I'm going to have a portfolio career. Where do you see the balance? And I've got 2-part question. One, from the consumer aspect of the individual and their own career path, and then taking control. And we're seeing this even in the healthcare system, from I abdicate it to a company and white lab coats to, no, I'm taking control, I'm going to look at what's available, to, my career, that's my company, they'll look after me, they'll give me some pathways, to, no, I'm taking control, but how can I access it, as one part of what's going on, together with this other part of, as you said, technology and people playing together and engaging within organizations and making it proliferating. So where do you see, in your view, those unique opportunities of the experience that somebody can access it through a good company package versus if you don't, what might be coming that you can take some control yourself to access some of these things in a way in which will help you with your future potential.
So I do believe that companies increasingly will see as part of their offering, like they might have a learning management system, they might be drawing upon almost a sort of a Netflix of learning. They will also want to have coaching as part of the suite of opportunities for their employees, part of the benefits that they're offering employees. And in a knowledge economy, in knowledge organizations, where no longer we're turning up to do the same job in the same way as the person sitting next to me at the hot desk, actually, we need to personalize learning and personalize development, because I'm different, as I've suggested earlier in our conversation, to the person sitting next to me. So I think organizations will be offering that. But I also believe that at an individual level, some of us might prefer, it might be more convenient at a price point, it might be more accessible for certain types of individuals to have that app-based solution. But I'm also, and somebody who works in the tech industry, who really believes in the power of technology, leverages that power of technology, I also want to emphasize the power of humanity, and that there is something special about one human being talking to another human being. And while I'm conscious that some of the digital coaching platforms, not CoachHub, but others, have taken the view that it's acceptable to record calls, taken the view that they'll transcribe that, and probably with an aspiration towards creating an AI coach, I'm sure in 3, 5, 7, 10 years' time, it may be possible to draw all of that data together to produce a humanized voice. Maybe you could even choose your voice. I want to be coached by Barack Obama. I want to be coached by Gandhi. And you take those recordings and you break it up into the sound bites, into syllables, and then you stick that together with the AI app, who then says, this is the right question to ask at this moment in the conversation. And so you have a conversation with Gandhi or Barack as your coach.
We're seeing this now. You know, Tony Robbins is doing it. You can talk to Digital Deepak, you know, these various things that have got that content that's been then digitized and then layered within an interface for you to interact with it. And the fidelity of that conversational AI is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. And it will go in that exponential way of where it will be gradual and then sudden. And then it will be a choice, I guess. Do I choose to have this, or a real life Jonathan, or digital Jonathan, or a digital, as you say, Barack Obama that layers that interface? Are you excited by that?
No, I'm not excited by that, because I come back to my point. There is something special about a human. Yes, we can do that, and it might be quite fun. So I think there's a big step between having a conversation and having a coaching conversation. Mm-hmm. So the tech isn't there to have a great coaching conversation. It's clunky. It isn't very good. So we need to take significant steps forward to even reach the level that my 11-year-old could have at the moment for a coaching conversation. Technology isn't there to match her, let alone a trained coach or a skilled coach with a lot of experience. So we're several steps away from that. But even when we reach
let's say that comes, that it's actually the same as, they will never be as good as us in chess or in this. And then suddenly the moment comes where it's better.
It's
the point at which it's better because it has access to not just your singular skull of experience as a coach, as experienced as we are in the decades we might have. What if it was the interconnected experience of everyone's coaching, that it can then look at the efficacy of every particular one and be better than us? What then? Well,
but is it desirable? So instead of making the choice for having a digital coach, I'll choose a human coach. Yeah. And if I'm drawn towards, if we believe humanity will choose the digital coach, will we also choose the digital partner? Instead of having a wife or a husband or a partner who's at home, actually, sometimes they're a bit rude to me. I don't want that. Sometimes they don't make the cup of tea in the way that I want it. But a digital wife, a digital husband, a digital partner will be perfect. So I'll choose that. Is that the vision of the future that we want? And I suspect in my view, and we could argue about this, and maybe your next guest will have a different perspective. My view is I want a relationship with a fellow human being, as imperfect as I am and as imperfect as they are, that we relate as human to human, and we experience empathy for them as they demonstrate and experience empathy towards us. Yes, I might ask Alexa to turn on the television. I'll ask Alexa to check whether anyone's broken into my house or who's at the door. It can provide us with factual data, but I suspect that most humans in 20 years, in 50 years, and 100 years will prefer to have a relationship with another human being as that intimate relationship than to have an intimate personal relationship with a piece of technology. Not that technology hasn't got a role to play, it has, but when we're talking about personal and intimate, personally, I'm always going to choose the human.
I like that. And I think for me, I propose choice, and the future to be able to choose, to have connection with a virtual or physical entity should be the choice of the individual. And some of that connection that they might get of having an ear with a virtual person versus a physical person will be different. And so choosing that, I think, is the path that we're going on. And just two final thoughts. So we have a couple of announcements that have happened. We have, Accenture advising us that 150,000 of their new employees will start their first day of their employment, of their onboarding, on the nth floor, NTH floor, which is a virtual VR. So they will start their first day of employment in VR for their onboarding. And we have organizations like PwC that have just announced 2.4 billion in redefining the employee experience through an app that gives them ultimate flexibility. This week, I want this many hours, I want to do this, I want these types of gigs, and building that platform of technology. I want this learning, this is what's happening. So we're seeing these big organizations shifting to embrace VR, to embrace learning in that space, that perhaps for another episode, another time, we could dive into a little bit of that. But just as a final piece.
Ross, let me just pick up that.
Please.
What you're offering, and I absolutely agree, it's not either or, it's both and.
Yeah, it's the great improv, it's the yes and, right? And the world we're getting into is more of these yes ands. And the challenge, as always, is one of filter. It used to be of access to the answer. Now they all exist. So we've got to get good at the questions, and we've got to filter from all of this noise. There's so much content out there. How do we filter that noise that's going to work for me and that is going to engage with me and doesn't just perpetuate the echo chamber of, oh, that's something I always like, that we can get a bit of diversity, a bit of mental flexibility of an opposing opinion, an opposing thought to allow us to evolve in a empathetic, inclusive way that allows voices for all to exist. And our mission is to ensure no one's left behind. So whatever that is, that we are giving a future for each individual is one that creates a smile on their face when they get up, not a disappointment. And that's, of course, a relative term. So my final question as we wrap this up, Jonathan, is when was the last time you did something for the first time, and what was it?
So the last time was around about a week ago. For the first time, I went for a bicycle ride with my daughter, who has been very nervous to learn how to ride a bike, and got her first bike, and we went for a ride on the road together, having practiced a little bit in the garden, and she's now feeling a little bit more comfortable. We live in the countryside, so through a couple of country lanes, we went for a bicycle ride, and she got back and is loving riding a bicycle, which she has been very reluctant to do, been very nervous about conquering that fear. That was a lovely experience.
Lovely. And it's a great analogy for life, isn't it? That the thought of something, yes, we're going to need courage because we don't have the capability yet. So there's going to be some fear, but we do it anyway. And when we do that, we gain some confidence, we gain some capability around it. So wonderful. It's been an absolute pleasure to chew the cud with you, to have some thought around what coaching's future may be, some of the impact, what we might think about within organizations. And I look forward to multiple conversations with you in the future and diving into some of your papers and work and books. So thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Ross.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalised report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams and organisations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favourite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.